We are back. Play it forward. Kristine Gerolaga, writer, director, producer. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is, like I was saying, really a really cool project that you guys are doing.
You're so sweet, and I really appreciate you saying it. It does, like I mentioned, inspire us to continue and, make it happen. And today we're going to be talking about Mosquito Lady, and it's a very interesting film. Um, I am very curious to know how you came to this idea. But before
Yeah.
we even go there, if you can share a little bit about yourself as a filmmaker and your
Sure.
history and where you're at with life and Mosquito Lady as a setup as well, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I actually started out as an actor. That
Uh,
was my way into my work as a filmmaker because when I first started, of course, you come to the really tough realization that there are not that many opportunities, not at the time when I started, not that many for women in acting, women of color, Filipino Americans. So it was really my acting teacher at the time, Robert Zimmerman, who encouraged our whole acting class to write ourselves, a project to start in, like to not wait for any opportunities. This was a time when YouTube was really starting to boom and people were really taking the reins of their own careers as creators. So um, after that assignment, I was like, I don't want to just write it. I'm really itching to go ahead and make this thing. And so enlisted all my friends who were so kind enough to get together and help me make my first short film. And so so I wrote, directed, starred, and produced that one. And then ever since then, I just couldn't stop. I had to keep going. I
wow,
had to keep making short films. So I've been making short films since 2012-ish.
that's great.
And so, alongside my creative partner, 𝘔𝘰𝘴𝘲𝘶, we make everything together. He worked on Mosquito Lady as well. And so Mosquito Lady came around, the idea for it actually came around as a feature film around 2016. At the time, I had been volunteering as a pro-choice clinic escort, just helping people, get from their car doors into the clinic for whatever reason that they're there. And, many of them weren't even there for abortions. So, but because there were often anti-choice protesters outside doing really extreme things to shame the people outside, to insert some form of guilt, even sometimes, in a dangerous way. I just saw up front what that kind of uh divisiveness looks like.
Yeah, yeah,
And
very harsh.
yeah, and as we know, the state of reproductive rights continues to worsen to this day. Even in my own home country, the Philippines, it is the absolute worst. There's just no, um, in any circumstances, people can't get this kind of procedure,
Mm,
which
mm,
is terrifying. So
mm,
a lot
mm,
of people are,
mm.
the most vulnerable people are dying. And so it just, to me, this project came about because I was thinking about body horror, which I think this experience
Yeah,
really is, and just my anger, my reaction to what was happening. And I wanted to couple that with a really terrifying creature from the Philippine folklore called the
mm,
manananggal, which in our folklore, that is a monster that specifically targets, preys on pregnant people and their unborn. Like it literally eats the fetuses of pregnant people, which is like, I don't know. I'm still like myself trying to understand the origins of that specific
mm,
monster, but I wanted to, use that as a way to comment on what's happening right now.
yeah.
And the lengths people have to go to when they're in a desperate situation and there's no access to safe and legal abortions. So that was a
Yeah.
lot.
No, thank you. I mean, that's
Lot of stuff.
it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we want, to hear is it's such a strong piece and it's a very passionate one. And, you need to have a real force of inspiration driving you to make something like art in general, but this kind of a short film project, which is technically really superior, especially where you have the special effects going on. That was pretty yeah.
We are really
So
lucky to have an incredible team. I just feel so fortunate. Yeah.
and so the Mosquito Lady was number what in the pantheon of short film projects for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm, I mean, there was a certain point where I was making like 1 minute micro shorts and I had
Yeah.
made 20 of those. So
Oh,
like if you
cool.
count each one of those
Yeah.
individually, I mean, it's way over like 30 short films probably
Awesome.
at this point. But
Awesome.
like
Good for
in
you.
terms of like a standard time length of a short film, maybe my fourth. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe my fourth. Yeah.
Good for you. Well, it's, very professionally done. And, we talk about the inspiration for the piece. You shared that. I think the interesting part, now for me, as I reflect on the film, is really, like you said, is like, what is the origin of the myth? And even before we go there, and as we kind of talk about this, maybe it can lead into the origin of the myth, but the intention behind the work and even the meaning, if, whatever you connect with, whether it was intention as developing it, which you've discussed, but really the meaning and the message of the film with the narrative arc and how it all, comes together. In the beginning, in the middle, or the end. What do you think? What do you see as a viewer now, as you're watching this film, that hits you as a message?
Oh, wow. Well, specifically with this one, I think the takeaway for me is how do we talk to our youth about their bodies, about their rights? Um, how are we using our beliefs as a tool of oppression? Um, how do our choices affect other people? I think uh, those all feel very like kind of big and vague, but I think, if you watch the short film, hopefully those come
Oh,
across.
for sure. I mean, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, those are very concrete, because, watching the film, the young protagonist is certainly oppressed by her overbearing, dominant, controlling parents that are, whatever they're doing, whether their views are correct or incorrect, it's not even, a matter of that. They are, intimidating her into submission to do something that they want her to do. And just the communication isn't fair and it's not appropriate and it's not, dignified in the way a human being needs to be honored.
Yeah.
So, being talked to in that fashion in such a, violent manner, even if it comes from these good intention people,
Exactly.
is
Yes.
still gonna F things up. And here you have this young woman who is then goes to these desperate lengths and is, riddled with confusion. She's not sure of reality and, is she starting to potentially see things, lose her mind, and she goes to the links of going to the claws of where she shouldn't go just to have her baby, be gone, to have this problem be taken off her hands. And, it's interesting too, is that it's such a complicated subject. It's so complex having, a child is, excruciating responsibility. And especially if you, are trying to honor that responsibility and with white glove kind of care,
Right.
um, and what that looks like. And it's so dynamic. I mean, kids do need firmness and they do need direction. And at the same time, they're so sensitive and they need to
Yes.
be approached in a way that's, not going to hurt them and scar them. So, the woman essentially runs off because she just wants to get rid of what is a problem.
Hmm.
And so there's a level of culpability on her part as well that she's, kind of trying to run away. And she runs into the arms of danger. And here is this being, and they have this ordeal and this confrontation, and this being is not kind of volitionally evil. She's somehow made to have been so, and she's sort of released from her demonic self in a way at the end, and that
Yeah.
sort of becomes potentially a rebirth. But the child is born. Oh, I don't want to, but sorry,
No,
we
no,
can
no,
cut
no.
that out if
All
you,
good.
yeah. But which I didn't expect, and I guess, with that sort of kind of confrontation, and the parents do come at the end and they, hold the young woman who just came out of a, very graphic scene. I
Yeah.
guess, with that, it's kind of like I think everything that you've said is like, hey, that's sort of the part we can all agree on. Like, yeah, it's not fair to be put in this position, and the communication, right? The
Yeah.
communication is, what was the communication beforehand? Maybe there was so much communication that didn't happen that could have with the woman
Right.
to prevent this situation from happening.
Yeah.
But now that it did, and particularly going the protagonist going into this home, trying to just make this abortion from this kind of monstrosity that was created probably to frighten, people not to have children prematurely.
Hmm.
Um, what do you kind of make of that? I mean, she's so desperate, right? There's a desperation there that she's just like, okay, I'll do any length. Just
Right.
I'll go to this mythical being to take it out. And I guess that's really, you know, as I discuss it and think about it, that level of desperation, I think is kind of the message in a way that people are willing to do anything just to save themselves from.
Yeah. I think we hear so many of the horror stories of the lengths that people have gone to. I mean, I've heard of women tossing themselves down the stairs,
Yeah.
beating themselves to hopefully like physically beating themselves using hangers. I mean, this is not, even though it is a horror film and it goes to a really
Oh,
extreme place, it is like this is
nothing
based on
compared.
reality.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
this is based on like the true, and as we're both talking about, the desperation that people feel because they feel trapped, right? In this,
yeah,
oh, they feel trapped in this situation, which, like you said, like, and I'm so happy you said this, you know, it's not just about communication, it is also about the lack of communication. Like, how are we communicating and how are we not? I think growing up personally, there were there weren't real conversations about sexual health, sexuality. It was like it's so taboo, in many cultures and communities, and the way to combat that, like the way they try to help you avoid it is like, preaching abstinence, preaching that, well, you shouldn't be having sex before marriage. If you get pregnant, we'll kick you out, your life is over. Like very, very terrifying things to
yeah,
tell to someone who has just been on earth for how many years, you know what I mean?
right,
Like still kids. They're
right.
and she's a girl. Like in my eyes, I see Gemma as a girl who's just not unable to make sense of the world around her, and is very much basing her reality on what she's been told,
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think that's kind of, as we speak about it, I think that's the difference between, having this mythological, scary thing that sets these taboos so people don't do something or take certain actions, and then our modern day culture where we are evolving into a place where, we as adults in our generation and the, generations that are hopefully to follow are able to have these discussions. We at least recognize the importance of having these discussions, and
yeah,
how do we communicate with our children
yeah,
around sex, and how do
yeah,
we communicate with them around the desire, and then the responsibility, and then the things that can happen as a result, like babies. But
yeah,
that's just one of the results. There's a lot of
yeah,
other things that happen in terms of responsibilities that go into that creative act. What are
yeah.
your thoughts? I don't know if you have children or not, but it doesn't matter. How do you what do you think as a healthy dialogue that we can engage in with youth?
This is a question I love because, I don't personally have kids, but I really care um, about this particular subject. And, I'm not the best person, I think, to speak on that part of it, like the actual dialogue of what it should be. But there are so many people who are doing incredible work in that field of just like destigmatizing, removing the taboo and making it just about like, these are the natural things that are occurring within your body at a certain age. Hormones start to happen, and you'll feel certain things. You'll start to, feel fear around your own body and what you're feeling for other people. And I think there's just there are so many. I can't. I wish I had a specific person I can name off the top of my head right now, but of course it escapes me in a
Don't
moment
worry,
like
we
this.
can, add it to the post later.
Right,
Yeah,
right, yeah. But there are a lot of people doing just wonderful work in the sexual health field, and wanting to change the way we talk to each other, to our kids,
yeah,
to everyone about our own sexuality and our health, like just truly our body's health and the
yeah.
natural things that happen.
And ultimately it comes down to truth,
Yeah,
being honest with the child that's in front of you and just saying, hey, this is what I know,
yeah,
and this is what happens, and I've been through this, that, or the other,
yeah,
and you just, kind of go through the litany of questions that they may have, and the
right.
fears and that you may have as a parent, and just label it as what it is.
Right. It is just like a transparency thing. It is about
Yeah,
like providing resources,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Saying these are the things you can do to prevent, STDs, pregnancy,
right,
all of these things. You can talk to me, like being just open to and remembering our own experience growing up and how
yeah,
confusing that time is.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, no, I think those are all going to,
Transparency is a key word.
yeah,
I think it's a key word.
transparency. Yeah.
Since making this film, how have you been personally changed?
Oh, wow, that's so great. These questions are so great. I think since making it, I mean, I'm certainly still radicalized by what's happening around the world, especially in the Philippines when it comes to reproductive rights. But it also really made me understand, or at least start to have an understanding of, you know, well, even my own parents must have experienced as kids, right? And their parents and the parents and their parents and their
Yeah,
parents. It's like this is obviously a tactic. Like these tactics are passed down generationally. And as we said earlier, it's like this is not, they're not thinking this is oppression. They're thinking about protection. Like, how do I protect my child? How do I, like this is a form of love, I think, in their
yeah,
eyes. And
yeah.
so it made me see that.
That's
And so
big.
like there was a version, of the story where like you never see the parents' faces. They are always in some way
Right, right,
kept at a distance and
right.
kind of like demonized in their own way
Yeah,
because it's their
yeah,
fault. This is why this happened. And it's
right.
not the case at all.
Yeah,
That is not the case at all.
yeah,
Like at the end, they are seeing each other fully as human beings. And I think that is
yeah,
also part of the
yeah, yeah,
message, right? Like,
yeah,
how do we fully see the
yeah,
human beings in front of
yeah,
us?
yeah.
So that is one thing that really changed for me.
That's huge.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
huge. Create that empathy.
yeah,
Um, it's really big, because it helps us relive the story that may have happened with us in a way that it's no longer in the past, but it's
yeah,
in the present. And the story can change and we can move on and live our lives without the baggage and burden
yeah,
of what
yeah.
we feel should have been, or, you know,
Exactly.
shouldn't
Yeah,
have happened. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I hope, even if the ending feels bleak, Because there is like a tragedy to it, right? Like we don't know what direction their family will go in. I don't know if it'll change, right? I don't know what she'll pass on to her child at this point, but we can only hope that it does change them.
Right.
Yeah, we'll
Right.
see. I don't
Right.
know.
Right. Well, look, knowing grandparents, I don't know any set of grandparents that's been like, oh, it's
Yeah,
very rare. However it happens, if, and especially in the end of that film when the parents do come out and give her that embrace after
yeah.
she's come out of the house, it is um an optimistic end, and it's a brave film.
Yeah.
Kristine Gerolaga, filmmaker, writer, director, producer. Thank you so much for being on Play It Forward. Look forward to having you back.
Oh, thank you so much, Kasi. I just can't thank you enough
Oh,
for
you're
creating
sweet.
this
Nah, you're a
wonderful
sweetheart.
platform to showcase like all kinds of filmmakers because there's so many of us and
Yeah,
we have so much
it's
important work to share. Yeah.
it's amazing how much there is. It's amazing how much there is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for leading the way. Till next
Yeah.
time, everybody on Play It Forward. Bye. We're out.
Bye. Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks.